Hi there. Again, this is part 3. Please, once again, do not forget Gaza. There's no peace in Gaza. The genocide continues. Children are still being killed. They're hungry, without shelter, many of them. The open skies sometimes is their roof and the rubble, their beds. And now with what is happening in Iran, Israel thinks they will get away, but I will touch upon that as I continue with my messages. Now, I'm going to say something, I'm going to write something or talk about something that has to do with Benjamin Netanyahu. And before I start that, don't forget the children in Sudan as well. Israel is also involved in that conflict, making trouble, as well as others. Kids in the DRC, the Rohingya, Ukraine. We cannot forget kids anywhere. The kids in America without health care. The children who are locked up in their concentration camps without medicine. Some of them beaten, abused. We must not forget them. Now let me go on. Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu has become brazen with his genocide and ethnic cleansing because he has the full backing of his hostage, the United States of America. When the U.S. pulled out of the recent talks, so this was a while back, it was because Israel had convinced them that it was almost a fait accompli, that they would be able to clean out, that's their term, Gaza. They know that the window of opportunity is closing. Time is of the essence. There will be confirmation of this, but it didn't work out that way. This is why Netanyahu now claims that he is on a spiritual mission to bring along the fanatics in Israel. He's not a fanatic. His only ideology is celebrity, fame, power, emperor and king. He has no ideology, and of course he's a supremacist, an anti-black, white supremacist, racist. Now, he is on a spiritual mission, as I said, to bring along the fanatics in Israel and the Christian zealots, like their ambassador there, Huckabee, ignorant man, who do not realize that Christians for Jewish Zionists are also on the chopping block. But I think some are now experiencing it, like I think it was I don't remember if it was a bishop or someone, and they were actually spitting on him when he went to the Middle East. I think it was during the Christmas season. All you have to do is look at the raised churches, and the last one that they bombed in Gaza, and then they said, oh, they were sorry, it was a mistake. No, it's not. They were not sorry. That is what Israel does. They do things, and then they say they're sorry, but hey, it's already done. Empty apology. And let me read that sentence over. Look at the raised Christian villages and churches in the West Bank and Gaza, always with the excuse that it was a mistake. Israel's mistakes are always deliberate and intentional ones. History confirms what I just said. Indeed, the entity that is Benjamin Netanyahu is on a spiritual mission. A spiritual mission of a miscreant, believing now that he will indeed fulfill the role. This is for celebritydom of Joshua. I like to say Moses as well, all rolled into one. To complete the supremacist and racist journey the Zionists began at the end of the 19th century to depopulate Palestine of its indigenous inhabitants and erase them from history and from our memory by any and all means, including forced displacement, expulsion, ethnic cleansing, mass killings, summary executions, massacres, and genocide, and of course, privation, starvation, famine, disease. The spiritual edition is for the audience. Spiritual messages of souls on the low rung of the ladder of soul restoration. The book will explain all that. Have nothing to do with spirituality at all. But the entity, just as I said, wants fame, glory, and power. He wants to be known in history. This entity is now beginning to drink his own Kool-Aid. And sometimes I call people entities because I think of the soul as an entity. So I will say that, and when I say entity, I will also use it instead of he or she, okay? But it's not meant to disparage. This entity is now beginning to drink his own Kool-Aid, caught in his own web of lies, like Paul Joseph Goebbels. After all, he's king of the world, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. Look at what he has gotten away with in the glaring sun of broad daylight, with the world as spectator, as he deliberately targets and butchers children and babies, tens of thousands of them. I'm a run things, as they say in Jamaica. Bull, buck, and dopey conqueror. The original Dan Dada. He's running things. He's the boss, the big boss. He can even conquer ghosts, duppies, as they say in Jamaica. But the road is paved with unintended consequences, even for a king of the world. He is an emperor who has not yet realized that he's very naked. Netanyahu, Hitler 2.0, the butcher of Palestinian, Muslim, Christian, and now Iranian children and babies, knows history like so many of us. But what he does with history, he reads history, not to learn, to become better, but to aggrandize himself and learn how to repeat the mistakes of history, believing that he has found the perfect solution to get away with murder. That is the arrogance, hubris, and stupidity of supremacist ideology and practices. I call it AIS syndrome. Arrogant, ignorant, and stupid. You're too arrogant to learn. You think you know everything. And you're too stupid to realize that you don't know everything. And that indeed you are ignorant. He believes he's Cyrus the Great Persian. He's not even fit to ramasser, to pick up the spittle that falls from Cyrus's mouth. Cyrus committed many spiritual mistakes, as all of us have and still continue to do. All empire builders are propagandists and supremacists to a lesser or greater extent. But Cyrus also had many redeeming qualities. The United States Bill of Rights is based on what Cyrus wrote. And I discussed that in the book, including I don't know how he got to enforce it across his empire. So that's another question. And he didn't just liberate the Jews. He liberated all the captives in Babylon after Nabonidus. Netanyahu has no redeeming qualities. It is sad. He's someone who's on the very low, the lowest rung of the ladder of soul restoration, along with the golden calf, the whore of Babylon. Well, he's even worse. But nonetheless, through the eyes of the soul, they will tire of that wrong one day and decide to do the hard work to expiate their mistakes and start that climb. As I am doing now, I still have a long ways to go. Finally, Netanyahu's grasp of history should also teach him that through the temporal lens, the fields of history are littered with kings, autocrats, demagogues, tyrants, psychopaths and sadists, empires great and small, coming to an end, an ignominious end. England is a very good current example. England, or Britain, I like to say England, once the largest empire in our temporal history, as we currently know of, where the sun never set in that empire, is such an example. By the way, the Mongols had the largest contiguous land empire in the world, which meant theirs was on land. Britain, they had land and then of course across the seas, but the continuous, right? It continued. I think it was the Mamluks that stopped them dead in their tracks so that they didn't spread even more westward. Let me try and find my spot. Now, Britain, the Industrial Revolution, fueled by the iron technology of African slaves in Jamaica, technology they brought with them from West Africa and stolen it, helped Britain, do a lot of stuff in repairing shoes for the horses and ships and all of this. And that is one of the reasons why a lot of Jamaican men who worked on stuff like that, they were smiths, right? Blacksmiths and so on. They had less time in the fields, so the women had to work in the fields. So Jamaican slave women, slavery's bad, but Jamaican slave women were treated more harshly than slave women in other places because they had to make up for the men who had to work in repairing the ships and whatever. Now that technology was stolen by Henry Court, a merchant or industrialist. He was bankrupt, and so he stole the technology, patented it, and with the help of Britain, they closed down the factory in Jamaica and moved it, I think it was to Liverpool, but don't quote me on that. That technology was one of the major parts, the foundation of the Industrial Revolution. And that made Britain the lone superpower, the lone military superpower and economic power in the world for a century. Now, it has cannibalized itself, becoming a wingman and sycophant of its child, America. And I go into that in my book, and the whole story, and that battle in Ireland, the Battle of Kinsale that they had. If you've ever heard of Richard of Kinsale, that was Richard the Burgo. He was the one, the hero of that battle. That battle enabled England, Britain, the money, because they no longer had to fight that. So they had all the nobility that supported wars, because they were the ones who provided money for wars. It freed up the money so that they could continue with their colonialization of what we now know as the United States. Let me try and finish this now. Sorry, I get carried away. Now, divide and conquer, and I like to say that. So a man soweth, so shall he reap. Now, karma is not about revenge, but sometimes it looks that way, the way it plays out. Okay? It's not about revenge. It's about expiating, right? You expiate, cleanse the incorrect deeds that you do with corrective actions and trying to bring your soul back into equilibrium. Now, divide and conquer. Britain was very good for that. Responsible for so many conflicts that still plague the world today. Now, it has been destroyed by divide and conquer. That strategy that it sowed with politics it is now plagued with, for example, foreign interference and the whole Brexit stuff. In Zanzibar and in Myanmar, along with the Rohingyas in Myanmar, that strategy helped to cause massacres in Zanzibar in the 60s after Britain left, because of what it did, putting one group over the other. It was a horrible, horrible massacre. Read my book, it's in there. Freddie Mercury, the late lead singer of Queens, the group Queens, he was actually one of the refugees from that massacre in Zanzibar. Now let us recall the message given on September 20th, 2024 at 4:38 a.m. And remember, this is for entertainment purposes only. Netanyahu will have a sudden stop. Something is going to come out of left center. What will halt him? Please note that the message did not say that will halt him, but what will halt him. No man can go further than the length of his rope. We are all subject to the clock of the universe. When miscreants reincarnate to gain power and partake of the material riches, and advances in a society, they inadvertently become foils, lessons for us all. They do not realize that they are only pieces in the great chess game of the universe. Like Miss Thomas, psychopathic puss, the clock is about to stop. That puss is about to fall off its high seat of hubris. Supremacists never know when to stop. They always overplay their hand. And you see what's happening in Israel now. Overplayed their hand, and the secret is over. They'll never be able to gain back certain position, no matter the PR, no matter buying up all the media. No, too much. Divine timing. On August 23rd, 2025, I was shown the Million Plan. Remember that now, the Million Plan. Once again, its aim, they meant Israel, is to slaughter as many Palestinians as is possible. In their estimation, for every Palestinian murdered, butchered, there will be at least 3 to 6 more injured, perhaps another 3 to 6 who will die from hunger, hypothermia, disease, and other privation. They will try to prolong this travesty into the winter months with more privation of shelter and warm clothing and fuel, so that even more will die. The deaths or disablement of at least 1 million, approximately 1/2 of Gaza's population, is the aim to end this phase of them mowing the lawn. The macabre plans will be revealed sooner rather than later. Let us see what plans the universe has in store. Israel and the one-state solution. Memorialized in my books. This message has appeared in parts, and the last part was memorialized on Saturday, February 27th, 2026. Once again, 4 a.m. And I also elaborated on it even more as I was speaking with someone on February 28th, 2026 at 11:28 a.m. on WhatsApp. Quote, there will be no two-state solution. There will be a one-state solution. And although there might be a preliminary one, the one that will last will not be the one that Israel imagines. For indeed Israel will be absorbed into one state. For behold, there shall arise an energy of Saladin. The question is not if Israel will be absorbed into a one state, but one of when and how it will be absorbed will depend on its actions now and from this moment forward. This present in which we are living is becoming the past, and so these present actions will determine how it will be absorbed. In the final analysis, we must all surrender to the clock of the universe. Father Time, divine timing. It is better to be like the peach rose that lost not one petal in the Category 5 hurricane, or the coconut tree, than to fall like the big deciduous tree like the breadfruit or the naseberry. We must be flexible in life cannot say when. Perhaps it will not be in my lifetime, but it will come. Israel will be a one state of a one state. That is written. It will only be a part of a one state. That is written. What is not yet written is how it will be absorbed. It is up to Israel and its population to decide that part of its destiny. Well, I'm sorry to say that. I truly am. Let the record speak for itself, and I say that with the greatest of humility. I am just a messenger, as I was more than 2,800 years ago in the Levant, in what they now call Israel, what is now Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank. And I will talk about that at a later date. Perhaps I will do it in my book, my newest book to come, about the past lives, karmic journey of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. On March 4th, which was yesterday, no, actually it's today, 12:12 a.m., quote, there might be an exodus, a real exodus, not like the small one of long ago. The records show that it wasn't as big as we think. This exodus will be the real one. It is not set in stone. Only the people of Israel and their actions can determine this. March 1, 2025 at 11 a.m. As I was preparing the text for this video, so I didn't memorialize it elsewhere. So this is memorialized now. While Netanyahu creates a fog of war with Iran, we must not take our eyes off Rafah, the city of so many massacres over the decades, dating back, it says decades, on the Egyptian border, where the Trail of Tears, I can't remember the name now, but I think it's Leda or something, where Palestinians were marched from their homes, some died on the way, just like the Trail of Tears in America, with the 5 nations, indigenous, Native Americans, and the Trail of Tears of the, I think it's I can't remember now, in Mexico, of some indigenous peoples in Mexico. But I have all of this in my book. The city of so many massacres dating back decades, and the Egyptian border, as I read that, right? The Trail of Tears of, I think, Lida, will be repeated. While Jordan is busy shooting down missiles and drones to protect Israel, it might well serve itself by watching its borders and the evacuation of West Bank Palestinians. Go back to my video on Rafah, Netanyahu's final curtain call. It has a lot to say. It's in this book as well. Now, to say something, and I just wanted to get back at this now, Israel, according to the polls in Israel, the majority of Israelis support what went on in Gaza. What does that say? Not all Israelis, but a majority, more than 65%, support the killing and the massacre of babies and all that's happening in Gaza. That is a morally bankrupt society. But then we should not be surprised, because if a man like Yoav Gallant, the former defense minister, the one who said that the Palestinians were human animals, is talking like as if he is, the Himmler, Jefferson, and Buffon, the Comte de Buffon, where they looked on other people who were not white as subhumans. And if that man who ordered the starvation, complete siege of Gaza, and during his term there were the rapes, the bulldozing of the living and the dead mixed together, the lighting of the elderly, women and children in their homes, they're shut in their homes and lit a fire, and dogs set on people to bite them, to feed on the flesh of the dead. If this man is considered a moderate in Israel, once again, that is a morally bankrupt society. And in saying this, they can easily say I'm anti-Semitic, but I know better. I know who I am. To be anti-Zionist and anti-supremacist, and to stand up for the truth and justice, is not being anti-Semitic. They have weaponized anti-Semitism, a very real problem that has been around for thousands of years. And the Jews, like blacks, and the Roma, for centuries, more than with the Roma, 500 years in Europe, but blacks and the Jews for more than 1,500 years. They are the persecuted, so nobody can tell me I'm anti-Semitic. The truth is just the truth, and it should not be weaponized. Anti-Semitism should not be weaponized as it is, as all the propaganda, the scandal, gaslighting, the PR, the smoke that the state of Israel has used to weaponize anti-Semitism and the persecution of Jews, to confound it with anti-Zionism, a political, white, racist European. It was a brainchild of course, Britain. I tell you. Now, let me go back to reading. Europe. Now, this is memorialized in my latest book. If Europe does the right thing, then perhaps things will work out. We cannot support the invasion of any sovereign state because we do not like them. We cannot support attacking Iran, yet decry the same state invading Greenland or Canada. Learn. Look in the mirror. You have failed in Gaza and Lebanon and other places. Learn, and perhaps things might work out. Unfair game played twice. Justice is blind. Even our enemies deserve justice. I stand for human rights, which every government, including Iran and the United States, should observe. Iran, we must learn that even our enemies deserve justice. John Adams, the second president of the United States of America, one of the founding fathers and the lone independent thinker of those men. The only one, along with his son, of the first 12 presidents of the United States of America who did not own slaves, because for him, slavery was a foul contagion in the human spirit. He said, and he practiced it, that even our enemies deserve justice. Once again, I said before, Iran has been given a basket for carry water by the collective West, especially at the behest of Israel. The American Manchurian regime, and I call it Manchurian regime, like the Manchurian candidate, it's like a spy. They're in power in a country, but they're working for other countries. Well, it's not just in 2017 one could use candidate, but now it's the whole government is a Manchurian government, and I explain why in all of this. The American Manchurian regime is a fine one to talk because it has concentration camps. It has globalized human trafficking and torture, and that torture, as did another Republican government in the Bush administration with their black sites where they did the waterboarding and the torture, right, of prisoners. Incarcerated people in this administration, incarcerated without charge, and it has also executed its own citizens in cold blood. Look in Minnesota, tortured and imprisoned children. Look at that little 5-year-old boy. Ecuadorian, I think it is, boy. Took away the food and health care of its own children and millions around the world. Yes, Elon Musk, as Bill Gates said, something like, the sight of the world's richest man taking away food from the world's poorest children is not a pretty sight. Israel has no equal because even the Third Reich provided shelter, albeit it was horrendous, especially the gypsy camps, for the victims, most of whom they would later exterminate. That's not a very good comparison. If you think about it, if you're worse than the Third Reich, my God. Many in Gaza and some in the West Bank have only the open skies as their roof, the rubble for their pillow, bed, and blanket. And those include children and babies. We only remember the point at which we are aggrieved, but forget the point at which we aggrieve others. The West and Israel have aggrieved Iran. Many cannot name what Iran has done to them. Iran did not create Hezbollah, by the way. Don't let anybody fool you. It was one of the unintended consequences of the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982. And we don't want to get started there with the Sabra and Shatila camp and the fact that the UN created a day, something like that, about children based on Israel's horrific treatment of children. It's in my book. Iran, as I said, didn't create Hezbollah. It was unintended consequences. Hezbollah was created by Lebanese to drive the Zionist invaders from their lands. In 1953, in what was named Operation Boot by MI6, and Operation Ajax for America by the CIA overthrew the people's government of Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in Iran and gave them the murderer Shah and his henchman Pervez Sabeti. Forgive my pronunciations. The director of the 3rd Division of Savak, the feared secret police of the Shah, with his electric chair named Apollo. Could you imagine that? And his beds with burners underneath. Those were some of the torture equipment that he had. Other methods of torture included forced nail extractions, and one that appeared to be a favorite of his, amputating one or more limbs of the people who were detained, and that included children. It is claimed that the equipment used by Savak, some of it, is also used by the current Islamic government. Now, I would be remiss and intellectually dishonest not to point this out. We all need to do better. This does not excuse, though, the West's treatment of Iran. Oh, by the way, this man lives in Florida. This executioner lives in Florida. Why did America and Britain do that? Because the Prime Minister had in their eyes the audacity to take over and nationalize Iranian oil resources out of the hands of foreigners. In this case, the company, BP. Events have now come full circle. That was in 1953. That's when the big rash of government, overthrowing of government, the big rash, not the first, the big rash, that's when it started. And it's come full circle now. I wonder what's going to happen. A popular uprising overthrew the Shah. There was the kidnapping of the Americans. That's where America likes to start its story as to why it hates Iran. They forget about 1953 and all the stuff that many Iranians had to go through with the Shah that the Americans supported. There was a kidnapping of the Americans, and Jimmy Carter tried some failed rescue attempts, so the Iranians gave him the middle finger by waiting until the same day Ronald Reagan came into power. They released them. America then proceeded, along with other Western countries, to collude with Saddam Hussein. Geopolitics, eh? To wage war on Iran, a theocratic state ill-prepared for war, had all these powerful nations, scavengers, at its doorstep. Germany, France, the Netherlands, the UK, and America provided Saddam with chemical weapons to use on the Iranians. They even built production facilities, I think it was mostly the Germans, in Iraq to produce chemical weapons. America fought alongside the Iraqis in the last part of the war, sinking Iranian ships, providing intelligence on Iranian troop movements so that they could be gassed with chemicals. Perhaps as many as 1 million Iranians died. On both sides, there were tens of thousands of child soldiers. While France sold chemicals as well to Iraq. Apparently it sold masks to Iran, gas masks, French, trying to thread the needle, as I will mention something else today, as the Emmanuel Macron tried to thread the needle, but that doesn't work. On both sides, there were tens of thousands of child soldiers. And I told you, while France sold chemicals, I need to pay attention to what I wrote. Many veterans became addicts. That usually happens in war, doesn't it? This is one of the driving reasons behind, I believe, Iran's determination with its missile program. Do we understand now? This is how they defend themselves from a world of enemies, many rich and powerful. Why would they give that up? To be invaded by Zionist supremacists, both Christian and Jewish Zionists. Not all Jews are Zionists. Israel wants to be able to attack them whenever they choose to go in and mow the lawn. Just imagine what they think of people. They are so arrogant and supremacist in their beliefs. They see others as beneath them. And that includes white Americans. But they only use them for now. And I will prove my point later on. Once again, not all Jews, and I think the majority of Jews, are not Zionists. Zionism is not a religious movement. Lately it is. Zionism is a white supremacist, racist, anti-Muslim movement. And if you're a Jewish Zionist, add anti-Christian movement to that. Even our enemies, as I said before, as John Adams said, deserves justice. Justice is without favor or fear. Europe, Australia, and Canada. Learn. Mr. Carney, the very American Manchurian regime that threatens Canada's sovereignty, you now support to do the same thing to another sovereign state. Israel, and I say shame on you, Mr. Carney. Israel and America pose existential threats to Iran and the entirety of the Muslim world, as America now does to Canada. So shame again, Mr. Carney. I think he kind of tried to soften it up. Look in the mirror. Justice is blind. It is without favor or fear. Do not complain if the same thing you helped to perpetrate becomes the lot of Canada. I wouldn't like it to be. I live here. I've lived here most of my life. Injustice is a slippery slope. When we see injustice, we must never condone it because it is convenient and does not affect us. If not, we will one day have to dance to the same tune. The same goes for Europe, Western Europe. France seems to have gathered some sense, but I'll get to that later. Denmark hopefully does not condone this. That is what supremacists do. Mr. Macron, yes. And no, Mr. Macron, you do not get a pass to admit the illegality of what America and Israel has done, but turn around and blame the victim. That is what supremacists do. Blame the victim as they have their boots on the necks of the victims. So a man soweth, so shall he reap. Once again, Europe, you have many challenges. If you do the right thing, find a tear to spare for every child in this world, and not just white or Israeli ones, and realize that the cup of empathy can never run dry, and apply justice and international law without favor or fear. Get out of your Eurocentric white supremacism and get over your guilt for Hitler's atrocities. The universe will work along with you to solve some of those issues. You are only great pretenders to the throne of virtue. Actions speak louder than words. Words belie thoughts that actions reveal. Spain, you have learned. You are a shining star in the darkness that exists in Europe when it comes to justice. Muslims and the Gulf state. Yes. Muslims are the international targets at this time that have united white supremacists, Christian nationalists, Hindu nationalists, Buddhists, as we saw in Sri Lanka some years ago, and a whole slew of different groups all over the world. Muslim terrorists. Now, these, when I tell you these, what my guides say. Muslim terrorists kill Muslims by many percentages, way, way, way more than other groups. There is an existential threat to Muslims. Now remember, I don't subscribe to any religion. Blacks, Jews, and Roma are always persecuted and have been for a very, very long time. And especially black people. Everybody poo-poo upon black people. Often repeated in my videos and books published in 2025, I point that out. This is why I dedicated an entire chapter in one of these books, highlighting the many contributions that the Islamic civilization, now remember, it wasn't just one great big kingdom. They had many different caliphates, many different cultures and peoples and races, all contributing, made to civilization, including Western civilization. And I go into what Western civilization is and how no one can claim. Every civilization has contributions from other civilizations. We are all standing on the shoulders of someone. Now, Islamic contributions. These include, and I'm going to do a video just on this chapter in my book. These include in medicine, surgery, chemistry, mathematics. No computers without Muhammad al-Khwarizmi, ophthalmology, music, architecture, landscaping, the fashion world, fine dining, hospitals, libraries. I could go on forever. In Timbuktu, books, learning, ideas were more important than gold. If you were a scholar and you had something to offer, you were treated like a king. Learning was very important in the Islamic world, in the different learning centers in Baghdad, in Damascus, in Al-Cordoba, Spain, or in Egypt. I look also in the book at Zaryab, the cultural super dynamo, we know that he was definitely Afro-Iraqi, but we're not sure whether the other half, and it really shouldn't matter, but we live in this temporal world of nonsense. Half of his parentage was either Kurd, Arab, or Persian. No Zaryab, no guitar. No Zaryab, no multi-course dining. That Jefferson, who believed that black people were subhumans, he loved all that fancy, nice stuff, crystals, and that's why he was in debt $100,000 when he died. No Zaryab, as I said, no multi-course dining, no crystals to replace those big old clunky Roman stuff. Even table linen to cover the table and add something to feast the eyes, right? And other finery for fine dining. No Zaryab, no fashion houses. That's where the first fashion houses started. You had to go to a Cordoba to find what was in style. Fashion houses with seasonal colors and fabrics and so forth. He introduced bathing at least once daily or more. Toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, and beauty salons, music schools, no Zaryab, no chess from the Indian astrologers and / astronomers that he brought them to Al Cordoba from India. He also brought Jewish physicians from North Africa. Chess also made its way from India to the Great Persia as well. He introduced the bang, and encouraged men to shave, and women also to shave. He introduced the wild herb asparagus into the cuisine and a lot of other things. He was also a man of letters and science. In Islamic, during the golden age of the Islamic civilization, women were also well advanced in education. They contributed a lot. And there's something in, I think it would be in astronomy, I can't remember her name now, but it's in my book, that a woman invented. First mobile hospitals in Saudi Arabia. Oldest university in the world. And women were funding these. Women funded a lot of things, especially during the beginning of Islam in Saudi Arabia. A rich woman expanded Timbuktu. I think it's Al Sankour University. Indeed. I subscribe to no religion. Remember this when acting what I present according to my guides. Now, as I said, I've mentioned these in the latest of my books. And I've also said that Muslims need the energy of Saladin, and indeed it did show up in the messages for what will happen in Israel. Saladin, he unified Muslims. Muslims lost Jerusalem during the First Crusade because they were just like they are now. Each man for himself. When the Seljuk Empire, when that disintegrated into little petty states, you even had some Muslims supporting Christians during the First Crusades. house divided is not strong. And so Saladin, a very wise man, a very generous, chivalrous man, wasn't perfect. Richard, the Lionheart, actually laid waste to his small navy, but they admired each other. Let me get back to topic here. Well, he united the Muslims. He united them. He founded the Ayyubid Caliphate in Syria and Egypt. And that was how he was able to retake Jerusalem. And when I say this energy that will arise, no, it's not the reincarnation of Saladin. Saladin is alive today, but this is not his purpose today. The type of energy that he brought, that is what will arise. The terrorist state, that is Israel and others, they're wreaking havoc throughout Sudan and the Horn of Africa. And by the way, I'm going to get to an interesting thing for the Gulf states, an interesting message for them. None is immune, including the Gulf states, which I stated in previous videos. The Gulf states believe that they are immune from all that's going on around them. They think they're immune, but they're not. That's what the guides say. They have money, but that will not save them. The entirety of the Muslim world, all sects, which includes, like Shia, Sunni, Israeli, Druze, and in the entirety of the Muslim world you have Christians, the oldest Christians in the world. And the oldest Christian state, as decreed, was Aksum. The archaeological evidence is there to prove it, not just oral. And Aksum is in the Horn there of Africa. It was one of the quartet of superpowers or world powers at that time, and I think it's the 3rd, 4th century AD, along with China, Rome, and Persia. As I said, they have money in the Gulf states, but it won't save them. The entirety of the Muslim world is at risk. They are targets. The Muslim and Arab world, Western Asia, North Africa, the Horn of Africa. My light just went on its own. They include, as I said, Christians, Zoroastrians and other belief systems, Iraqis, Turks, Kurds, Afro-Iranians, there it goes again, Amazigh, Yazidis, Assyrians, Armenians, Circassians, Jews, Afro-Turks, Afro-Iranians, I think I said that already, Persians, and the list goes on. But the Christians will be next, if it is up to the Zionist Jews in Israel. Only they must survive. Israel. And by the way, the Muslim and Arab world includes all races, black, brown, white, and just a whole bunch of mixtures. But of course, racists and bigots never bother to to learn the difference. It really shouldn't matter because they're all mass, but they never bother to learn the difference. So they'll say racist slur when they see, excuse me, someone who might be Filipino. They'll say some racist slur that they use to maybe describe a Japanese person, a Thai, or maybe even a Central Asian. No, Israel was founded on terror and governed with terror, but it is no Sparta. It commits the supremacist act of Sparta, of what I call culling or thinning the herd of the indigenous people of the land. That's what the Dorian did to the Helots when they migrated into their land. Sparta, women, the women of Sparta, unlike most Greek city-states, were physically fit, just like the Minnow, the Dahomey Amazons in West Africa. What the Spartans used to do is they would mow the grass, as the Israelis say. Once a year, they would actually be allowed. You could kill the indigenous people. You got to keep the numbers down because they far outnumbered the Spartans. And that's what Israel does when it mows the grass. It goes in and it bombs, kills a few more, or hundreds more, thousands more. Now, according to the author Stanley Alpern, while the women of Sparta trained to give birth to men who would become warriors, the Minnow, those are the Amazon, the Dahomey Amazons, they trained, they were physically fit, just like the Spartan women, but they trained to kill men. Now, these Dahomey Amazons, that army, their army, was perhaps the most ruthless and most responsible for depopulating West Africa during the slave trade. Now, the French had good experience with them back in the 19th century. I'm being sarcastic. They caused, because they didn't have the firepower, but they were so fierce, they caused a lot of casualties amongst the French army. Were the French soldiers who had to contend with them here to speak today, they would let the Mossad agents who belittled the former ICC prosecutor, an African woman, when they tried to bribe her, saying, oh, she's only an African woman. Those French soldiers would let them know, don't think that, because those Dahomis are not just only African women. African women are not only African women. So to the racism of these people and the supremacist attitudes that they have, and misogyny as well. Once again, Israel is no Sparta. Sparta learned from its mistakes. Sparta knew not to punch above its weight when it refused many requests to join other city-states in their wars with the Medes. Those were the Persians. Even the mighty Sparta tried its best to avoid conflict with the Persians. It was the mightiest of the city-states, Sparta was. where in 490 BCE, an unexpected Greek do-or-die victory on the plains of Marathon, they defeated Persia. They also defeated them at Salamis in a navy battle and at Plataea because the Persians used to beat them all the time. And they got in with the first loss that gave them their self-confidence, the Greeks. And so they started the propaganda. And it was one of the playwrights, I think can't remember his name, Aeschylus or something, who wrote a play portraying the Medes as being effeminate. Israel, once again, you are no Sparta. You want to spread your wings and create an empire using the might of America. Without America, it's ignorant Christian Zionist zealots and the compromat that you have used, along with Jeffrey Epstein, to compromise its politicians. It cannot realize its dreams. You, Israel, cannot realize a dream of domination and subjugation of the Muslim world, and later Christians in the Levant. I did also say in video 6 and in my essay written March 2025 that Israel had America in its pocket, on its side, until it does not. Well, less than a year in. I think that was, 2024 actually, before the elections. Well, I think we're at that point right now. No amount of propaganda, buying up the different media landscapes will or can be reversed, because the horrors and genocide and butchery of even babies, the starvation, the thirst, the sniping, the bulldozing of even the living, the 24/7 horrors that we have had to endure, the world as spectators have had to endure, has been to such a degree to desensitize the desensitized. Israel has ensured that the genie cannot be put back in the bottle. Its psyops and shock cruelty, overwhelming atrocities meant to desensitize the world, failed and has done the opposite. Its arrogance always leads it to overplay its hands, that supremacist ideology and practices. And now for the Gulf countries. Gulf countries must beware of the technology. I memorialized this on March 2nd at 1 a.m. I didn't write it down, but I did yesterday as I was preparing this. So we leave it at March 3rd, 2026 at 3:14 p.m. Gulf countries must beware of the technology that they're purchasing from Israel and the weapons. This they will eventually use to foment instability and eventually take them down. Think of the pagers and cell phones. Don't forget that. They have only to listen to the whore of Babylon, the chaos agent, the golden calf. But the gold is not real, it's fake. The entity with the cloaca mouth. I did not fully grasp the meaning of the Jamaican expression to describe someone who talked incessantly. It's like they have diarrhea of the mouth. They keep no secrets and they chat everybody's secret. I didn't understand that. When they would say, the man, does that chat like him, nyam, foul, and I don't say those words, but Batty, like fowl's butt. They must have eaten the butt of the chicken or the cloaca. And that causes them to have diarrhea of the mouth. Chickens usually poopy every time they eat. Birds, most birds do, I believe. If I'm wrong, please correct me. If we had bowel movements in like manner, we would call it diarrhea. Now, sometimes we are born with a mark of what I call Cain, and this is through the eyes of the soul. It is used for different purposes. Sometimes it's for souls to recognize each other. That's one of the good things. The whore of Babylon, right? So the mark of Cain labels us as well, marks us for whatever reason. The whore of Babylon, think as I said before what the whore means. It has many different meanings. Like some says Rome, and it could be referring to whatever, but think of the wider meaning of what a whore is. Remember now, you run your children under the bus, your wife, your mother. You have no principles, no love. You don't know what love is. You don't love anyone but yourself. You'd sell anything. You're lewd, you're lascivious. No no form of discipline. You engage in all the vices. It's like a lack of humanity, totally devoid of humanity, morally bankrupt, no empathy, no sympathy for anything or anyone. And you'd sell, as I said, you'd sell anyone, including yourself. That's the whore of Babylon. So the whore of Babylon, it's in Revelations actually, who is the head of the, what I call back to the good old days politics, has the mouth shaped like a cloaca. And I'm not saying that disparagingly. That's the mark of Cain. We should never let him know our secrets because he will spill them. And in Jamaica they say that for one, like that, with a cloaca mouth, if you are relieving your body because it came and you have no other place to go, you should just sit down in it. You sit in it so that that person doesn't know what you are doing. Because they will make your business go abroad. They'll tell everyone and your business will go abroad. Everyone will know about your affairs. When the whore of Babylon did suggest that America should sell subpar equipment or weapons to its allies, this was talk that he heard but cannot help himself to keep a secret. Buyers of Israeli weapons and technology, beware. You might be in for a rude awakening. Ripe for the picking when Israel is ready to topple you. And as I said, thereafter the Gulf states, when they're finished with Iran and possibly Turkey and elsewhere, they will turn to the Gulf states, and I will tell you why in a minute. It is like the warning about 5G and spying and all of that, and the danger and the national security threat that it poses. I will add here, though, that America doesn't need to worry about 5Gs. It's a Manchurian regime. It's all out there, all their business and secrets. Secrets are abroad. The regime, Manchurian One, is not concerned with the strategic interests of America because the alignment that they propagate stretch across borders for world domination. They're in collusion. As described in my books, what America has to worry about, and especially with the Manchurian regime it has leading it, they need to worry about the 3 G's: greed, grift, and grievance. Now, I think that perhaps, let me go for about 10 more minutes and then I'll stop this and then come back and finish. And this, when I do the 4th video, it should only take about 20 minutes. I did memorialize in several videos, books in 2024 and 2025, that the Gulf states are not immune, as I said. Israel would be coming for them soon enough, as well as Egypt, Jordan. When Jordan no longer serves the purpose of intercepting missiles to save Israel. We talked about that a bit. Negative exceptionalism, envy, and covetousness are all part of the playbook of supremacist ideology and practices. The bombing and attempted assassination of Hamas negotiators. By the way, Israel has been assassinating negotiators since 1948. See my book when it assassinated the negotiator for the UN. That man, I believe, was one who had organized during the war the white ambulances that saved, including Jews, people from Nazi Germany. I think his name was Folk, I think. Now, Israel. If you see my book, you'll get a bird's eye view of the future. Negative exceptionalism, envy, and covetousness, as I said, are all part of the playbook of supremacist ideology and practices. As Israel marches through the Muslim world, it will bomb every historic site in the Great Persia to try to erase its history, not realizing that the Great Persia has survived Alexander the Great and even the Mongols. Hitler aligned with Stalin. Stalin provided wheat and oil, among other things. These were strange bedfellows because Hitler was no friend of the Soviet Union or communism. Want all, as they say in Jamaica, lose all. Why should, in Hitler's mind, why should he have had to depend on Slavs? Stalin was Georgian, though. People on the bottom, but he ruled over many Slavs. Because, right? People on the bottom of the hierarchy. Remember, the Aryans were on top. Western Europeans were on top. You know, the British, Western Europeans, the Italians, the Greeks, and them, they were at the bottom. Even though they like to acquaint themselves or equate themselves with Greek civilization. So, it will indeed show its bad-mindedness because nobody else should prosper. That's what negative exceptionalism is. Bad-mindedness, covetousness, envy. That's a Jamaican term, bad-mindedness. By the time you're finished, you will have learned a lot about Jamaican proverbs and terms. Now, as Israel, as I said, marches through the Muslim world, it will bomb every historic site, and it will do that in the Great Persia because it is trying to erase Persian history that's over 5,000 years old, because only they must survive. And as I was saying now, sorry I got sidetracked there, Stalin was Georgian, yes. So Hitler wasn't happy that he had to depend on this Slav. So he launched, the supremacist that he was, he launched Operation Barbarossa, 1941. The largest offensive in history. It utilized millions of men. In 6 months, over 8 million lives were lost. It was a total disaster, an epic failure. Logistics played a key part in that. The Nazis knew from then, most in the hierarchy, that they were never going to win that war. You need oil. You need oil. You need fuel. But they knew from 1941, and the war didn't end until 1945. Just imagine how many tens of millions of lives were lost. How many lives were lost in those concentration camps. The Nazis, as I said, they knew then. But being the death and suicide cult that is supremacist ideology and practices, see Israel's, Samson's doctrine. You'll know Samson, the strongest man. Samson was the strongest man in the days of olden. I'm not a singer, but that was a song in Jamaica when I was a little kid. I remember all those things. And he brought down the temple on himself as well. Now, they knew that, but they continued to wreak havoc, death and destruction all over Europe, the British Isle, Africa and elsewhere. There was still a theater of war in North Africa. Some people probably don't know that. Maybe the younger kids don't know that. And in the different colonies, like in East Africa, German colonies, there were problems going on. There were a lot of deaths there too. Not that the active war was there, but because of what they took the people out and stuff like that. So consequences of it. Now, he still tried to control the oil. So, in 1942, he launched what was called Fall Blau, Taste Blue, an offensive on Stalingrad, Vladivostok, to take over that's what it's known as now, to take over I had a lifetime there. I was a hobo, but people came to me for wisdom, for counseling. I used to travel with my stick and my little bag tied over it. And I gave a lot of jokes. To take over the oil field of the Cox, while also attempting to impede the logistics of the Soviet army. He forgot about the logistics of the Third Reich, Sixth Army. So he was outmaneuvered. He was encircled, about 90,000 of them, German soldiers. And eventually, only about 5,000, I believe, lived to return to Germany. Any military commander who's worth his salts, so to speak, knows that logistics is one of the keys to victory. Richard, first the Lionheart, That was always foremost in his mind. That's why he was so brilliant. So was Saladin. The Third Reich, they were often incompetent when it came to logistics problems. Israel envies the Gulf states. That's what my guides show me. For the oil and the vast wealth that it has generated. Netanyahu's ultimate aim is to dispossess them of the source of their wealth and subjugate them. Ever wonder why he marauds through the Levant, destroying everything in his path other than the fact that Israel has never had to pay for the damages that it wrought or wreaks in Netanyahu's mind? He says, now take this with a grain of salt. This is what my guides tell me. Let the dirty Arabs pay for it. They have all the wealth. So they build, rebuild, so Netanyahu destroys, praying that his cycle will also accelerate the wealth, the depletion of their wealth. The wells will run dry, both the oil and the money. This is the same attitude that the whore of Babylon has and the American Manchurian regime. But remember now, there's oil in Lebanon, Gaza, and Israel. Are you going to share it with the people, the beasts, on two feel according to some of Israel's founders? I have all this here. That's what they call Palestinians. One of the names. Once again, they showed me Pakistan is on the roster, as well as with problems coming from the South India. Now, North, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the West, Israel. And all the stuff that's going on there. India and Israel have a hand in them. Every Muslim state, if you know history, sometimes you don't need four eyes either. Every Muslim state is at risk, as I said. Once again, Israel is a terrorist, anti-Muslim. Its English founders were anti-Muslim. Racist, white, Eurocentric, racist supremacists. The founder, the British, the people who had the idea. Anti-Christian, going back to Israel. White supremacist state. Note that when there will be no other boogeyman, Israel will have to deal with the racism. Israelis will have to deal with the racism within their societies. Forever wars have helped them, as I mentioned before, avoid this. England is the parent of America and Israel. Israel is a poster child for supremacist ideology and practices. My book details the entire playbook. You can read it and know what supremacist ideology and practices, all the things that it entails, co-opting signs and symbols like red shoelaces and Doc Marten boots by neo-Nazis. Co-opting other people's history, erasing people's history, talking about manifest destiny and that God bequeaths you lands. Cult of death and destruction, overplaying your hands, creating reality on the ground, dehumanization, and the list goes on. Israel, to finish this section off, has weaponized the suffering and persecution of Jews that Jews have endured over the millennia. to confound, as I said before, Judaism with Zionism, anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism, to commit murder and get away with it. As previously mentioned, it believes that it is Sparta, but it is only Sparta in the abominable acts it has committed against Palestinians. Israel is the child that is like a scorpion, or they have some insects that eat their mothers. Because we have only to see the terror that it unleashed on the British. Some people would say maybe that's, I don't know, poetic justice. So a man sow it, so shall he reap. But remember now, karma is not revenge, but sometimes it looks like that. When it bombed the King David's Hotel and the Sargent affair. The Sargent affair happened in 1948, and I think that was the last time they had an anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic protest in England. And what happened there was they were terrorists. The torture, the killing, the rape, the pillage, killing a whole village of Palestinians and dumping their bodies in a mass grave lining up. These are all listed, so we won't go over them in my book. And they gave the British the Dickens. And so they arrested some of them, the British, and they sentenced them, sentenced them to, I think it's hang or execute, a capital punishment. And so they kidnapped 2 British soldiers, Menachem Begum, he was one of the leaders of that particular terrorist group. He became a former Israeli prime minister, and they said, you commute the death sentence and we let the soldiers go. The soldiers, I think, were working in the intelligence area. Well, the British didn't do that, and so the terrorists, they killed the 2 sergeants, and then they hanged them in a eucalyptus grove, and then they booby-trapped the bodies. So you see that double tap that they use, and I'll talk about that in the next little video. And fortunately, 1 British officer was wounded. So it rules with terror and admits it unabashedly. You've got to give them credit for that. They say what they do and they say what they mean. Now, that was the only way. They said terror was the only way they could drive Palestinians from their lands and homes. My book, as I said, has many quotes from the founding fathers of Israel, politicians and leaders that describe in their own words their ideology, how they were going to achieve their aims. It is best when we describe who we are in our own words. They admit that they will tolerate 15 to 20% of Palestinians to be hewers of wood, carriers of water, waiters, and their slaves. I didn't say that. They did. They admit that they would hate, if they were Palestinians, they would hate the Zionists because they have driven them from their home, their lands and home, taken away what was a thriving society that had been there for thousands of years, caused them to live under the open sky. And when they returned to harvest their crops, because they were hungry, the Palestinians, they shot them and made certain they returned to Gaza missing 1 or 2 limbs. This is what, in the words of Moshe Dayan, a former defense minister. If you're old enough, you will know he was that dashing Israeli with the patch, the eye patch. And then, of course, we saw all of this repeat itself. They're just going by the same instructions that the founders had when they killed Palestinians, when they came for aid at that phony site manned by American anti-Muslim personnel, mercenaries, and some Israeli soldiers, I suppose. People pick up the aid, and then they, as they turn to go away, they shoot them. We're going to end this at this time. Wow, 1 hour and 40 minutes. I talk too much, maybe. So I'm going to come back with cautionary tale with America and Israel. I will be back. Thank you.